Looking at this question, it says two forces whose resultant is 100 newtons are perpendicular to each other. If one of them makes an angle of 60 degrees with the resultant, calculate its magnitude. Now let's just look at the first sentence in the question, which says two forces whose resultant, that's the case of resultant, is 100 newtons are perpendicular to each other. What do these two words mean? Resultant. Resultant force, resultant vector. What does it mean when we say, oh, this is a resultant force? The resultant force is a force that has the same effect as all other forces. So what I mean is, if you have a point here, this is say O, and then you have a force A acting on it, you have another force here, B acting on it. The resultant force is a force that has the same effect as A and B combined together. We'll call it R. So mathematically, you can write that a resultant force R is equals to A, which is a vector or a force, plus B. So in the second statement, it says if one of them makes an angle of 60 degrees with the resultant, calculate its magnitude. So we have a resultant, the resultant vector we call R. And now we know that one of the forces the angle between them is 90 degrees. That means we can now conclude that the other force is going to be here. Sorry, this is not 90, it's supposed to say 60 degrees because the angle between, it says here in the question, the angle between, if one of them makes an angle of 60 degrees with the resultant, so 60 degrees here, and then all of this will now be 90 degrees. That's between, as the angle between this vector and this vector is 90 degrees. So this is our question now. This is A and this is B. After analyzing the question and properly understanding it, we now know that we are given two vectors or two forces with a resultant of, call it R, which equals to 100 newtons. We know that these two forces A and B are perpendicular, and the angle between one of the forces and the resultant, let's assume it's this one, is 60 degrees. It could also say the angle between A and the resultant is 60 degrees, or we could say the angle between B and the resultant is 60 degrees. Either way, we would arrive at the answer the question is asking us, because the question hasn't specified exactly what force it is. But now we know that what the question is asking us to find the magnitude of just one of the forces given the resultant. Now looking at this might be a little bit complicated for you because you don't understand what is going on here. But how about we put this in a triangle form, whereby we could apply some form of mathematical concept to solve this problem. So let's do this. We have our resultant vector. This is 100 newtons. We have one force here and another force here. This is A and this is B. And we know that the angle between the resultant and B here is 60 degrees. And then we can also say this is here is our 90 degree. So now we have a triangle. We have a triangle, we have the angle, and we have the length. We can now treat this force here. We can treat the force here of 100 as a length. That doesn't mean it's a length, it's still a force, but we're going to treat it as a length to simplify our problem. And so we'll now say that the distance between this point and this point is 100. And so now we could apply our laws of trigonometry to solve this problem, where we have the angle and we have the length of the hypotenuse, and we're looking for the length of B. Looking for the length of B here, because the question said if one of them makes an angle of 60 degrees with the resultant, calculate its magnitude. This is the force that made an angle of 60 degrees with the resultant, and so this is the angle we're going to be referring to. If A made the angle of 60 degrees with the resultant, then we'll be solving for A. But because we chose to solve for B and made B 60 degrees to the resultant, we're going to solve for B. So now we're just going to be looking for B here. So B now is our unknown. Looking for B here. So using our laws of trigonometry, we have the angle, check. We have the hypotenuse. We have the opposite. We don't know but we don't know the adjacent. We only have the hypotenuse. We're looking for the adjacent. We don't have anything to do with the opposite, so we'll leave that for now. But then we know the angle. Let's call the angle theta. And the angle here equals to 60 degrees. So which trig ratio can we use to solve this problem? Yes, cosine. So you could say from SOHCAHTOA, we can say the cosine of theta, which is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, and we're looking for the adjacent, so we can say this implies that the adjacent, which is B, equals our hypotenuse times cosine theta. And so we can see B here is equals to 100 newtons times cosine 60 degrees. And if you look at your calculator, you would see that cosine 60 degrees is 0.5, or I believe it's given to you in the question, 0.50. And so you can conclude that B now is equal to 50 newtons. So the magnitude the magnitude of the force that is inclined at 60 degrees to the resultant is 50 newtons. Now we can go ahead and solve for A, but that's not necessary because the question doesn't ask us to find the magnitude of A, but we know that the magnitude of B is 50 newtons. I'm going to use SOHCAHTOA again